There is now a fourth pathway to achieving sainthood within the Catholic Church. In a letter issued Tuesday, Pope Francis announced the new way would recognize people who willingly give up their lives for others. Up until now, the only routes to sainthood were dying for the faith, living a life of heroic Christian values, or having a devout reputation. The Vatican provided some regimented criteria for this new fourth path. First, the person must freely and voluntarily offer up their life in the face of certain death. There must be a connection between the act of charity and the premature death. The individual must have lived a life filled with Christian values and had a holy reputation. And finally, there needs to be a miracle attributed to the person sacrificing their life. The miracle requirement is pretty standard for all candidates for sainthood, though those who are martyred don't need one to be beatified, which is one of the steps toward sainthood. Pope Francis has canonized a total of 850 saints during his 5 years as the head of the Catholic Church.
It's not a shrine or a temple, but a median on a busy Palm Street, where neighbors say people from all walks of life come to pay their respects.
It's not something you see in every neighborhood, so I think it has touched a lot of people.
But a few months ago, the median looked like this, littered with trash, until one day a Buddha mysteriously appeared. Neighbor Stephen Frankel says it's not clear where he came from, but at that point, everything changed.
There was no more garbage left anywhere near it. The area seemed clean, and beyond that, people started leaving donations at the statue.
But since then, the Buddha has been vandalized 4 times. The latest just last week, decapitated and attacked.
And that someone had drove by and rolled down their window and screamed the word Islam and then Nation of Islam at the statue and then sped off.
A few hours later, Frankel says what appeared to be the same man hit the Buddha with a sledgehammer. It's already been replaced once and its head reinforced with rebar. Lee Wallach with the area's Motor Avenue Improvement Association says he worries the vandal is still out there.
There's no link to Muslim extremism. This is actually a community that embraces all kinds of religions.
Buddha's current state hasn't stopped people from leaving flowers and offerings. Neighbors plan on filing a police report, but until then are keeping an eye out for the person who did this and hope to replace the Buddha again.
There's just something about the statue that brings people in the area together.
What happens when a rabbi, a priest, and a Buddhist take psychedelic drugs? Scientists want to find out. 24 religious leaders from a wide range of denominations are part of an experiment currently taking place at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Scientists are giving participants 2 doses of psilocybin. That's the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. The drug has long been used for its mind-altering properties, and users claim to have experienced going on spiritual journeys, seeing hallucinations, and gaining a distorted sense of time. This experiment aims to find out if such a transcendental experience changes the way religious leaders think and whether they become more confident in their work. A full analysis won't be published for at least another year, but a study member told The Guardian, quote, "So far, everyone incredibly values their experience. They get a greater appreciation for other world religions."
3,500 square meters of gaming. This is Japan's largest virtual reality facility. Game software company Bandai Namco is behind the virtual reality zone in the heart of Tokyo's shopping district. It boasts 15 types of game, including Mario Kart, fishing and cycling through the sky on a winged bicycle.
The message is, lose yourself. We made this facility because we wanted everyone to just lose themselves. You get to interact with friends in reality, not over the internet. You get to ask your friends, hey, you fell over a cliff just now. Are you okay?
Particularly scream-inducing is the Haunted Hospital game, where players have to navigate through bloody hallways while being attacked by zombies.
The scariest thing was seeing people coming towards me trying to attack me. I kept saying, "Who are you?" I had no idea what was going on and honestly panicking from start to finish.
The virtual hub will be open for an undisclosed period from the 15th of July and is expected to prove popular. Video gaming is big business in Japan, estimated to be worth over $12 billion. With over 2 billion gamers around the world, the global games market is expected to generate over $100 billion in revenues this year.
Electric cars could spell big trouble for big oil. The long-awaited Tesla Model 3 began rolling off the production line on Friday, while Volvo said it would be the first traditional automaker to phase out gas engines. Researchers at Imperial College London predicting such cars will see oil demand drop by 2 million barrels per day as early as 2025.
I'm Reuters' Emily Wither at what many describe as the Olympics of the oil and gas industry. This year's World Petroleum Congress is in Istanbul. So just how worried are people here about the rise of the electric car?
Electric cars are also becoming more affordable as battery prices drop. Their prospects already threaten wrenching change for the oil industry.
Electricity investments for the first time overtook investment in oil and gas sector.
That's the head of the International Energy Agency. He says global investments in oil and gas saw another big decline for the second year running. No surprise, though, if the oil industry body wants to stay positive.
We still believe that the global oil demand will continue to grow despite the growth in electric cars, because there will be a lot of oil needed for trucks, for ships, for jets and for the chemical industry.
Not everyone is so convinced. Market watcher Daniel Yergin agrees that oil demand will continue to grow in the short term, but says it'll level out by the middle of 2030.
Cash is going out of fashion in China. Replacing it is the digital wallet. So prevalent, it's almost possible to get by with just your phone, as long as it's loaded with the right apps. This is how many people in Beijing start their day. Breakfast on the go.
I'm going to get myself a tianping or crepe for breakfast, and instead of my purse, I've got my phone. Now the next step is to look for the QR or quick response code, a two-dimensional barcode designed to be read by mobile phone cameras. To pay, I simply open the app I want, scan the QR code, enter the amount, complete the transaction.
Digital payment can be used almost anywhere for almost anything, from buying groceries to unlocking one of the city's shared bikes. A recent survey suggests more than 70% of Chinese internet users think carrying cash is no longer necessary. But there are also risks: data theft, scams, as well as concerns that government agencies could target service providers to gain information for national security purposes.
I do worry about security breaches and privacy now and again, because in China, data privacy is not well protected.
As long as the data is collected and used legally, that's all right. Of course, there's a risk that information may be stolen, but the service is so convenient that I'm prepared to ignore some of those risks.
Last year, the value of third-party mobile payments in China more than tripled to $5.5 trillion.
Still dark in the Venezuelan city of San Cristobal as Aracelis Medina and her niece begin the daily odyssey to make a few dollars in neighboring Colombia. Her first stop, the market's butcher.
This is where I buy the meat I take to Colombia. It's good meat, and thank God I have somebody there that buys it from me.
2 stacks of devalued bolivars buys her 5 kilos. Her daughter joins her, the meat hidden inside their purses. Next stop, the bus ride to the border. A coffee, the only thing any of them has had.
It's an hour and a half ride.
At the border, Colombian authorities stop people and check their bags. But with tens of thousands crossing every day, most get through.
Even when they stop me, I usually get to keep it. It's never more than a few kilos. It's just for survival.
From the border bridge, they walk another hour or try to catch a lift. The Colombian client, fearing repercussion, didn't want to be filmed. Neither the informal money changers, where a single Colombian bill turns again into a stacks of bolívares. The entire hurdle gives Aracelis a profit equivalent to $4. The spiraling recession in Venezuela has tens of thousands of people coming up with creative ways to make a living along the border. The government often blames them for the country's shortages, but none seems to get rich doing it. The lines at this soup kitchen for Venezuelans get longer and rowdier by the day.
A massive iceberg the size of Delaware has broken away from Antarctica. UK-based Project Midas confirmed early Wednesday the colossal iceberg finally broke away from the Larsen C ice shelf. Scientists had been waiting for this to happen for a while. Researchers had been monitoring a big crack in the ice shelf for more than a decade. That crack grew dramatically at the end of last year, and by January, the 2,000 square mile section of the ice sheet was hanging on by a thread. This new iceberg won't make sea levels rise because it was already floating. Think of it like ice floating in a glass of water. That Larsen C ice shelf is attached to Antarctica, but the section that broke away wasn't. But the Larsen C shelf prevents other glaciers from getting to the ocean, and if the whole thing breaks up, those glaciers could contribute to rising sea levels. Scientists say the newly split iceberg is one of the biggest ever recorded. Its volume is double that of Lake Erie.
Scientists think that the Earth is on the edge of a mass extinction. In the past 500 million years, there have been 5 such events, the most recent being a massive meteor strike thought to have wiped out the dinosaurs. In a study published July 10th, researchers from Stanford University and the National Autonomous University of Mexico studied nearly half the known land-based vertebrate species. They found the number of animals that once shared the planet with humans has almost been cut in half. The researchers called the current event biological annihilation, due largely to human factors like habitat destruction and pollution, and they think we need to address those issues. A researcher from the University of Maine who was not part of the study said, quote, "At the end of the day, protecting biodiversity is the goal. Even if this isn't a mass extinction, we're clearly still losing species that we care about."
The bubonic plague, which was once responsible for killing a third of Europe's population, has resurfaced in New Mexico. Health officials recently announced 2 people had been diagnosed with the illness, bringing the total number of patients diagnosed in June to 3. All of the cases occurred in the county of Santa Fe. The 3 patients all needed to be hospitalized for medical treatment. However, none of them have died. The plague is a bacterial disease. Symptoms include fever, chills, and fatigue. It is carried by rodents, and people most often contract it from flea bites. Health officials advise people to keep their pets on leashes or indoors and use flea repellent. In the 14th century, the bubonic plague killed an estimated 50 million people.
We believe right now it is a pipe bomb.
FBI teams are investigating an explosion at an Air Force recruiting office in Oklahoma. The explosion was reported late Monday night in the city of Bixby, which is just outside Tulsa. Police and bomb squads along with FBI agents combed the scene. Police confirm the explosion happened outside the building. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives was also on scene, fueling questions about a domestic terror attack, but FBI agents are shying away from calling it domestic terrorism just yet.
We have not confirmed a subject. We also don't know the motive behind it. So at this point, we don't know if it was a disgruntled employee, an act of domestic terrorism, just someone playing games. So we're treating it as strictly a criminal investigation with an explosive device.
The office was closed at the time and no injuries are reported.
Everyone's okay, thank God. They did it at night, which was a blessing. So they obviously didn't want to be seen, but they wanted to make some kind of statement. But yeah, we were lucky on this count.
Agents say the target of the explosion is particularly troubling.
Especially to hit on our military, that is a big deal to us. Yeah, this is something that we do not take lightly by any means.
The center's property management says a nearby restaurant has surveillance video of the incident, which the FBI will be reviewing.
Sergeant First Class Ikaika Kang was recently arrested on terrorism charges, but had expressed support for the Islamic State group as early as 2011. Even so, he remained in the Army for years while the military and FBI investigated to determine if he posed a threat. Kang was taken into custody over the weekend after declaring his loyalty to the terrorist group and saying he wanted to, quote, kill a bunch of people. According to an FBI affidavit filed Monday in federal court, Kang is on record making pro-Islamic State comments and threatening to hurt or kill other service members back in 2011.
In a change of policy, the U.S. military in Afghanistan said that it will delay announcing any troop casualties until after next of kin have been notified. Since 2001, whenever a U.S. service member was killed in action, the death was reported in a press release immediately. with the deceased's name withheld. The Pentagon would then release a second announcement 24 hours after next of kin had been notified, with more information, including name and rank. The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, General John Nicholson, quietly instituted the change over fears that families could be left guessing after casualties were announced, but before they could be notified. The change was revealed when Army Private First Class Hanson Kirkpatrick was killed in Afghanistan on July 3rd. But officials did not announce that a soldier had been killed until Wednesday, when his death and identity were released at the same time.
The Libyan National Army has defeated extremists in Benghazi. The announcement comes 6 years after the murder of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. And since 2011, the country has been in chaos with different factions battling for power. LNA commander Khalifa Haftar has now claimed victory in the east. RT's Brigida Santos has the latest from Los Angeles. So, Brigida, will this finally bring peace to Libya?
Last week, Natasha, General Khalifa Haftar made this announcement on television. Take a listen.
The military forces announced to you the news of liberation of the town of Benghazi from terrorism, a total liberation.
But just days later, his forces announced that, in fact, the fighting is now continuing. Now, this is not the first time that General Haftar has prematurely declared victory, but it does look like the last of the militants are being driven out. Now, I want to mention that it's unclear exactly who these militants are because there are very few reporters on the ground. So all of this information is coming through open sources. Meanwhile, violent clashes are continuing in cities outside of Benghazi. Just this week, several people were killed during fights between forces that are aligned with the UN-backed Government of National Accord and one of its many rival groups. It's unclear whether that fighting will further strengthen support for Haftar, which he mainly enjoys in the east. Other people in the country accuse Haftar and his forces of committing human rights violations and say that they worry that Haftar will simply become another Gaddafi-style strongman.
نحن اليوم بدنا نقدم حفل بعنوان من رماد الحرب حلب تنبض بالموسيقى. هذا الشيء طبعا كثير شيء عظيم لانه بالنهايه نحن الكنيسه اللي رح نقدم فيها هذا الريسيتال او هي الكونشيرتو خلينا نقول هي ما كنا نقدر نحن نجي عليها بسبب الاوضاع اللي كانت قبل، يعني بسبب اوضاع الازمه.
Turkish police say they killed 5 militants from the self-proclaimed Islamic State group when they raided a house in the central city of Konya. Regional authorities say 4 police officers were slightly wounded in the operation. According to the Dogan news agency, special forces launched a series of raids because they believe the suspected militants were planning an attack. The governor's office said a gunfight ensued when those in the house resisted. Police later recovered several weapons and ammunition. The area was sealed off and approaching vehicles searched after the clash. These pictures show suspects already in detention being taken for health checkups. In the recent past, ISIL has carried out several attacks in Turkey, and many foreign fighters have passed through the country on their way to join the extremist group in Syria and Iraq.
Saudi Arabia has executed 4 men convicted of terrorism charges. Saudi Arabia's Interior Ministry says they were executed July 11th for their roles in terror attacks in the country. The Saudi press agency reports they had, quote, committed a series of capital crimes. Those included announcing disloyalty to the country's supreme monarch, joining terrorist groups, staging violent demonstrations, and attacking police personnel. The attacks the 4 men were convicted of were carried out in the Qatif region. Al Jazeera says the region has recently experienced a surge in violence between the country's Shia Muslim minority and Saudi security forces. The executions were carried out just 1 day after Saudi Arabia executed 6 other people for murder and drug offenses. Saudi Arabia has now executed at least 48 people in 2017. Non-lethal crimes such as rape, armed robbery, and drug trafficking are all punishable by death in Saudi Arabia.
The noose tightens around Donald Trump with every new revelation about his team's links to Russia. Democrats were quick to attack the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., saying his meeting with a Russian lawyer last year provided fresh evidence of collusion between Trump's team and the Kremlin.
Good afternoon. We cannot rely on any public representations that are made by the family about their contacts with the Russians. We have now seen a very demonstrable pattern of obfuscation and dissembling about these meetings.
Julian Assange was among those urging Trump Jr. to publish his emails in the name of transparency. He offered to do it for him anonymously via WikiLeaks. 2 hours later, Trump Jr. published them himself. Political and legal analyst Lionel told us that there's no substance in this story, only the buzzword Russia, making it a point of discussion for the media.
Whenever you hear about this Trump collusion meeting, always ask the question, and? Because that's what you have to do. And Donald Trump Jr. met with this Russian, and he thought maybe he would have some oppo research or opposition research. And it turns out that she didn't, but she wanted to talk about, apparently, adoption. And that's it. Somebody said, treasonous? There's nothing here. But let me tell you what is the saddest part. We have been told Russia, 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 Russia to such an extent that maybe by virtue of this repetition, there's been some kind of a cerebral connection made where people impute guilt whenever that word is meant. And I'm not kidding you. It's almost like a brainwashing. There is absolutely nothing to this story, no matter how you look at it. From anybody's point of view, there is nothing there. Nothing.
President Donald Trump is being sued again, this time by a group of Twitter users who've been blocked from his @RealDonaldTrump account. In a lawsuit filed Tuesday, the group argues that account is a public forum and that it's therefore unconstitutional for the president to block anyone from accessing his tweets. The plaintiffs call the Twitter account, quote, a kind of digital town hall. They allege their First Amendment right to free speech is being infringed because they can no longer view and reply to Trump's tweets. Trump's director of social media, Dan Scavino, and White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer are also named in the lawsuit because the plaintiffs believe they have access to the @RealDonaldTrump account. Trump uses his personal Twitter account to make official statements, like when he announced he was nominating Christopher Wray to head the FBI last month. And the White House has previously said the president's Twitter feed is an official platform.
Are President Trump's tweets considered official White House statements?
Well, the president is the president of the United States, so they're considered official statements by the President of the United States.
The lawsuit follows a letter to Trump from the Knight First Amendment Institute. It asked him to unblock users on behalf of 2 of the plaintiffs named in the lawsuit. But the White House never responded. The plaintiffs are still asking to be unblocked and awarded attorney fees.
United States House of Representatives Democrats said they would introduce a new version of a Russia and Iran sanctions bill on Wednesday. The move is a new bid to change legislation that has been mired in partisan squabbling for almost a month. Democrats accuse House Republicans of stalling the bill to weaken it after the Trump administration expressed concern about provisions setting up a process for Congress to approve any of Trump's efforts to ease sanctions in Moscow. House Speaker Paul Ryan said he wants to move a strong bill as soon as possible, but that the legislation still faced procedural and policy hurdles.
The United States has revealed it's considering a so-called secondary boycott toward China as part of its countermeasures against North Korea's missile provocation. At a regular press briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said Washington will sanction third-party countries and companies that are involved in activities that help the North financially. She also stressed the U.S. will further strengthen measures to stop illegal money flowing into the regime. She thanked China for its cooperation in pressuring the North, but said the United States expects Beijing to do a whole lot more.
South Korea has received its most advanced submarine to counter North Korea's underwater combat capabilities amid heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula. South Korea took over a new 1,800-ton submarine on July 10th. Named the Yugwon-sun, the 213-foot-long submarine can reportedly stay underwater for 10 days at a time without resurfacing with a full crew on board. According to the country's Defense Acquisition Program Administration, the diesel-powered submarine is capable of handling more than 300 underwater targets simultaneously. South Korea hopes that the new submarine will close the gap and improve the country's underwater prowess against North Korea, which is believed to have a fleet of at least 80 submarines. South Korea, in contrast, currently has 15 submarines in service. The Yuguan Sun is set to be deployed in December.
Italian firefighters have been battling numerous separate blazes on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius near Naples. Tourists and residents have been evacuated for the second time in a week as a precaution after some observers thought the clouds of smoke were coming from the volcano itself. The flames have devastated pine forests and hectares of woodland in the area. At least 100 active fires across the Campania region are being tackled by around 600 firefighters and civil protection workers. Although arson in some cases hasn't been ruled out, dry weather and strong winds have certainly played their part.